Chapter 196 The Rumors That Followed His Release. Rain frowned. Then why are you crying if you trust that he isn't cheating? I'm crying because I'm happy he's free, and I'm crying because he hasn't contacted me yet. Could it be that he's mad at me for something? He's been back since morning and hasn't called to inform me. Don't start torturing yourself on things you have no control of, Mia. Rain warned, but her own voice was strained with emotion as she watched her best friend crying a river and choking on her tears. Mia wasn't listening to Rain. She was staring at the screen and listening as the reporter said, Novaria's prosecuting attorney, Edward Gideon, is about to make a statement from the courthouse there. The picture switched to the steps of the courthouse, where a dark-haired man in his 30s was walking out the doors and addressing a mob of reporters waving microphones and shouting questions at him. Hold your questions, he warned them, putting on a pair of glasses, until I've made my statement, and then I'll answer what I can. When the furor died down, he raised the paper he'd been holding in his hand and began to read. Yesterday, Neil Wayner's attorneys requested a special meeting with my office here in Novaria. During that meeting, we were provided with a sworn statement from Simon Jorgen to the fact that he had framed Wayner to get revenge. Simon also provided the weapons used to commit the murder, which we'd been unable to find on Wayner 5 years ago. Preliminary ballistic tests performed this morning indicated that the weapons were indeed used to murder the victims. Immediately following our meeting with Mr. Wayner's attorneys, they demanded the release of their client. Neil Wayner has been duly released. There are still some legal formalities to be dealt with regarding his escape from Novaria's prison 2 months ago, which technically violates the laws of our country. However, it is the opinion of this office that Mr. Wayner has already paid a high price for his brief illegal freedom with his 5 years imprisonment for a crime he appears not to have committed. Any questions? The man asked, looking up at the reporters. There were dozens of them, but the one that came across the loudest was the one he answered. Mia continued to watch with tears streaming down her face as the man answered all the questions. She couldn't believe that Neil had finally succeeded in clearing his name, and she couldn't believe he'd not gotten to her by now when she'd been praying every day for this day. It was either he had too many things to do before getting to her, or either he realized he didn't want to be with her anymore now that he was a free man and his image had been restored. Getting back with her would mean ruining his restored image. She sobbed brokenly as she pressed her palm to her mouth. She refused to believe the latter because Neil would never do that. Though it had been 11 hours since his release, she still believed he would call her. Perhaps he wanted to surprise her at home rather than call her to inform her. Yes, that could be the case. She'd clutch on to this possibility rather than let herself overthink his reason. The day hadn't ended yet, thus she'd wait. With those thoughts, Mia wiped off her tears and took a deep breath. Then, as if she hadn't been crying just now, she glanced at Rain and cheerfully asked, I'm craving fondue. Are you going to stay for it? Rain was a bit taken aback by Mia's quick change of mood, but then she nodded her head. Sure, and she watched in astonishment as her friend stretched her arms and headed to the kitchen saying, I've been bored the whole day anyway. Thanks for coming here to personally inform me. You're welcome, Rain said with a smile as she made an effort to uplift her friend's spirits. Since she had no plans for the day, she decided to join Mia in the kitchen to assist her. However, as she was about to move forward, she overheard the television reporter discussing Liam Thompson's latest girlfriend, Linda Tudor. Rain couldn't help but express her disgust, scoffing at the screen when she saw Liam's photo alongside his girlfriend. What's the matter? Mia inquired upon noticing Rain's reaction to the television. I can't believe this guy, he's such a player. Linda Tudor is his 10th girlfriend this year. He changes women as often as he changes clothes. I hate men like that, especially Liam Thompson. Rain vented. I can't believe he was my teenage crush. If my younger self knew this side of him, I would have despised him just as much as I do now. Just seeing his face on the screen made Rain feel the urge to scratch his handsome features with her nails. Men like Liam deserved to be run over by trucks. Despite recently losing his father, he showed no hesitation in cycling through women as if they were disposable items. Noticing the repulsed expression on Rain's face while she watched the entertainment news about Liam, Mia couldn't help but smile slightly as she remarked, Liam isn't as bad as they make him out to be. I've actually met him in person, and from my interactions with him, he seems like a decent guy. Don't judge him based on what you see in the news. You should get to know the real him. Honestly, he comes across as more attractive and courteous than how he's portrayed in the media. Rain shook her head, declining Mia's offer. No, thanks. I'll pass. I have no interest in getting to know the real him. All I know is that he's repulsive. Besides, I have Max by my side. Liam Thompson can do whatever he pleases with his life for all I care. My memories of him from my teenage years weren't pleasant either. He never responded to my affectionate letters, and he returned all the gifts I sent him without even opening them. I've moved on from him. To shift the conversation, Rain guided Mia back to the kitchen, asking, now that Neil is back, what are your plans? Mia's smile faded slightly. I'll just wait for him. Soon, the entire world heard about Neil Weiner's release and the injustice done upon him for 5 years. Everyone began to talk online, momentarily forgetting Mia's scandal. To show their sincere apologies to the country's hero, many citizens came out with candles and cardboard papers with words of apologies written on them, singing on the streets for Neil. They couldn't believe they'd misjudged a man who dedicated his entire life to protect their country, and now that he was proven innocent, everyone wanted to make up for what they'd done. Even the president sent an invitation to invite Neil Weiner to the presidential house, but ever since Neil's return, he hadn't acknowledged anyone's invitation, nor did he make any effort to answer the reporters swarming outside the hotel he was staying. Young elite women who'd found him attractive even when he was still a fugitive, were willing to give anything to get his attention, but Neil wasn't responding to anyone. He remained in the hotel room for 2 days, and it was making people worry that something had happened to him. Rumors spread online about his relationship with the supermodel they'd seen on the television on the day of his release, and since Neil didn't come out to clarify any of the rumors about him, the people believed it to be true. They all began to blame Mia for his lack of responses to everything happening. They believed he must have been so heartbroken by her betrayal of whoring around with many men online that he refused to come out or make any statement to the media. They began to drag Mia's name through the mud again, and many people despised her even more than they did before. To impress their hero, they made sure to make Mia more miserable than she already was. All of her verified social media accounts were banned, and she was banned from traveling to some certain countries as they believed her to be a bad influence on their youths. And as everything was happening, Owen, who'd initially thought Neil's release was bad luck, couldn't have felt happier at the outcome. At first, he'd thought Neil would go to Mia the moment he was released, but the man proved him wrong by not caring to even restore her image. Owen had been so mad at the news of his release he'd wanted to kill Simon's entire family for confessing to the crime, but then when he saw the news about Mia, it made him happier. Besides, Simon was a useless man he'd planned to kill after Kelvin Rodrigo made him the boss of the underworld months ago, but his imprisonment now had made things much easier for him. He'd soon take over Kelvin Rodrigo and be the big boss with no one to compete with him. However, before he'd do that, he wanted to make Mia his so that she'd be the queen of the kingdom he planned to build. Weiner was no longer a threat to him as long as he didn't interfere with his plans for Mia. Now all he had to do was take his final steps at the birthday banquet tomorrow evening, and everything would fall into place as planned. Chapter 197: The Birthday Party. The day of the Wallace birthday party everyone had been anticipating finally arrived. As expected, many influential families of the country were invited, and even many A-list celebrities were there. It was a sight to behold as the paparazzi and many reporters crowded the entrance of the hall. Many cars were seen driving to the entrance, and as the cars rolled up to the entrance, the excitement outside the hall reached a fever pitch. The red carpet stretched out like a ribbon of anticipation, leading to the grand entrance of the hall. Each arrival was met with a flurry of camera flashes and the clicking of reporters' microphones, eager to capture every moment of the star-studded event. Guests emerged from their vehicles, stepping onto the plush carpet with grace and poise, their outfits dazzling under the bright lights. Some paused briefly to exchange pleasantries with the press, offering quick sound bites and charming smiles before continuing on their way into the hall. Outside the Iron Barrier, where eager fans had gathered in hopes of catching a glimpse of their favorite celebrities, the atmosphere crackled with excitement. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, their voices rising in excitement as each new arrival was announced. Like a scene from the Met Gala, onlookers lined the perimeter, straining for a better view and erupting into cheers as their idols made their grand entrances to the party. Every guest dressed to kill and show their wealth. As the guests were emerging from their cars one after the other, inside one of the limousines at the back, Mia watched anxiously as the people were being stopped at the entrance to greet their fans. Though she was not the kind to feel anxious before a camera, after the things she'd been going through recently, she had come to fear the crowd and being on television. It had been 4 days since Neil had been released, and yet he hadn't contacted her nor reached out to her. However, he'd kept his bodyguards with her, and whenever she asked them about their boss, they told her he was busy and couldn't be disturbed. Busy? He'd left her to deal with the hate of the world alone while he was gone to who knows where and doing whatever. Hadn't he for once thought she'd feel much at ease to hear his voice and be reassured that he still loved her? She hadn't been able to eat nor sleep properly ever since the day he'd been released because she'd been anticipating his visit or his calls, but she'd received none. She'd been so surprised today when she wore her dress for the birthday party and realized how loose it was on her body when it had fitted her perfectly when she first bought it. She'd lost a lot of weight in her natural glow. Her skin looked so dull that if it weren't for Rain's makeup skills, she wouldn't have been able to hide her dark circles and the hollowness of her cheeks. She'd never had to wear this much makeup in her entire life, but because she couldn't miss this day, she'd had to hide under the makeup. And now, facing the press and the paparazzi at the hall's entrance was giving her anxiety, not to mention the dozens of crowds standing at the side of the entrance to glimpse their favorite celebrities. The last time she'd gone out to take a stroll, she'd been stoned by a random driver with an apple while he yelled out, "Fucking bitch, you'll rot in hell." She'd been so terrified and scared that she had remained in her house. The hate was so much she doubted if she'd be able to ever recover from it. And if Neil knew about this and was still refusing to meet her, then it would be hard for her to forgive him if he had no good reason for letting her and their unborn child suffer this much for his sake. She'd never cheated on him, but the world thought it was because of her he was not coming out. They blamed her for things she'd not done. Someone had gone to frame her by releasing intense sex videos online saying she was the one. Though she'd not had the courage to even view the video, she couldn't think of how people would believe it was her when the face wasn't revealed. As Mia stared out of the tinted window of the limo with her thoughts going to places, she didn't realize when the car arrived at the entrance until she felt Rain's hand cover hers. "Are you sure you want to be out there? I'll understand if you change your mind. The driver can drop me off while he drives you back home," she said, noticing the look on her friend's face. She looked so lost and traumatized by the crowd outside. Rain had even decided to ride with her to the hall to protect her from the press and the crowd today. She'd put so much effort into making Mia look as beautiful as an angel despite her condition, and everything was worth it, as the makeup and dress adjustment turned out perfect. Mia was a natural beauty anyway, but if she continued to look so terrified, the people outside would easily step on her and make her feel worse, and that was something Rain would be unable to stand. Mia managed a smile as she said, "I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. I can handle the crowd," she assured, but deep down she knew little things were enough to break her fragile restraint. She was on the verge of losing her sanity if the people continued to treat her like this. "We are here," Rain announced as the paparazzi and reporters prepared their cameras the moment their car stopped at the entrance, and Mia took a deep breath to prepare herself for what was to come. Outside the car, the reporters and paparazzi clutched their cameras in anticipation of the next guests to exit the limo. However, the persons seemed to be taking their time in the car, and the more time they took, the more curious the crowd and the paparazzi got. Everyone held their breath as the limo door was opened by the driver, and they watched in astonishment as one healed leg emerged from the car, then followed by the other, before the woman emerged completely. A collective gasp echoed through the crowd as they recognized the beautiful woman who emerged, clad in a stunning royal green dress worth millions, with each exquisite detail shimmering under the glare of the lights. The luxurious fabric hugged her body from the top to the waist like a second skin, accentuating her curves as it flowed around her like a river of green silk. With the scandal going on about her, no one expected she'd still have the courage to be here, but here she was dressed in a stunning dress that caught everyone's attention, commanding the spotlight effortlessly. Despite the scandal surrounding her, she exuded confidence as she stepped onto the red carpet. Though it was obvious she'd lost some weight from the last time they'd all seen her, she didn't lose her beauty, and when she smiled for the camera, revealing the dimples on her cheeks, the crowd momentarily forgot their hate for her and began to click pictures to capture her mesmerizing smile that the people had always found beautiful. Even the few celebrities who hadn't yet stepped into the hall couldn't help but admire her dress and its unique materials. Though some looked at her in resentment as they couldn't believe someone as low as Mia was wearing a dress worth millions and outshining them, a few admired her confidence for being able to face the cameras like nothing had happened. If they were the ones in her shoes, they wouldn't have left the walls of their home for the fear of meeting the media. But Mia Harrison smiled to every clicking shot taken. I can't believe this woman. After whoring around online, she's here stealing the spotlight from us," gritted Elena to her friends from the entrance of the hall. They'd passed by the crowds, and even though their dresses were as pretty as the bitch, they hadn't gotten this much attention like the whore was getting. "The dress doesn't even suit her body shape. Look at her stomach bulging out of it," commented Elena's friend, whose eyes were taking in every detail of Mia's dress before it fell on the little bump in her stomach like she'd had a large meal. Elena's eyes followed suit to see the bulge, but Mia turned around to look towards the limo, not giving her the chance to see her stomach. The bitch must have had a large meal. How shameless of her to be able to eat when the world is hating on her. Did she think by coming here acting confident was enough to make everyone forget her shameful behavior? Ha, she must be stupid then, because I won't let her off after what she did in that mall," said Elena with a smirk. "We will put her in her rightful place today." Noticing the flurry of camera clicks, Mia relaxed and began to confidently pose for the eager photographers. Rain, waiting in the car, nodded for Mia to proceed, graciously allowing her friend to bask in the spotlight. Mia only hesitated for a second before she began to confidently and elegantly make her way up the red carpet stairs. "Wow, Mia is stunning. Those diamonds around her neck make her look like royalty. Miss Harrison, could you please turn this way?" That was how they all began calling out her name from different directions, urging her to pose for the cameras. Just as she was about to enter the hall, thinking her scandal would not be brought up here, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Who invited such a disgraceful woman to this elegant place? She's a traitor. She has broken 2 hearts, one belonging to our country's Adonis." The woman's harsh words acted as a spark that ignited a fire, fueling the crowd's animosity. The people who were just taking her pictures moments before now turned to hurl hateful comments at her, while the reporters bombarded her with questions. "Miss Harrison, is it true that Mr. Weiner is in hiding because you broke his heart? Did you engage in online relationships to gain fame? Can you explain why you dated 2 men simultaneously and hurt them in such a cruel manner through your online videos? What compelled you to release such videos? Are you afraid of returning to the impoverished neighborhood you came from? Was it true that you've been sleeping around with men even before your fame?" Chapter 198: The Man Among the Guests. Mia felt a huge lump in her throat as the questions kept coming from different angles. She didn't know what to say, as everything they were asking her was not true. If she were to deny them without showing evidence, they would all call her a liar, and she would never admit to something she didn't do. Thus, she was left in a tight spot. Just when she thought she'd crumble at their questions, Rain exited the limo, and all of the attention went back to her, giving Mia the chance to slip inside the hall. With one graceful turn, Mia entered the hall, leaving behind the flashing cameras. However, inside the banquet hall was as loud as the red carpet. There was a soft piano playing in the background while the guests laughed and mingled around each other. Each time a guest arrived inside the hall and dropped their gifts, there was an announcer to state their names and affiliation. The minute Mia's name was announced, the hall fell into a hushed silence. Even the piano player momentarily stopped playing. All eyes turned to her for a moment before the loud chatter resumed again. With that, Mia knew she was the center of attention today. There was a mixture of eyes that followed her every movement. Some were filled with curiosity, some with disdain, while a few were filled with envy. Instead of cowering to the back of the hall like many expected her to, Mia walked into the decorated hall with her chin held high. She ignored their stares and judgmental eyes. She walked around the hall, looking for anything to distract her, but there was none. She was here for Rain, but her friend was still stopped outside. She walked around, and when she saw a waiter holding a tray of orange juice, she automatically reached out and grabbed one. Her slender fingers curled around the long-stemmed glass. Not long after, Rain walked into the hall, but because she was the host of Elder Wallace's birthday party, she was crowded by people before she could reach Mia, and Mia smiled at her as a signal to go ahead and entertain the guests. 15 minutes later, Elder Wallace entered the hall with his son, Jason, walking by his side as they greeted the guests. Aware of Jason's resentment towards her because of her relationship with Neil, Mia chose not to approach them and remained where she stood. She watched as Rain delivered a speech to her father from the raised platform. Frederick Wallace, her father, gazed up at his daughter with pride, as if she were the most precious treasure in the world to him. He chuckled heartily, his green eyes sparkling with delight whenever she made a witty remark. As the speech came to an end, both father and daughter were moved to tears. Mia observed the emotional moment with a pang in her heart, feeling a deep longing. She couldn't pinpoint the source of this feeling, but witnessing the bond between them made her wish she knew who her own father was. She wondered if he would have loved her as dearly as Frederick loved Rain, if he would have looked at her with the same adoration. She had never met him, as he had passed away before she got the chance to know him. She yearned to have even a memory of what he looked like, but she had none, not even a picture. Tears clouded her vision as she watched the heartfelt scene unfold. Unable to bear it any longer, Mia turned away and began to walk towards a quieter spot. However, before she could take a step, a prickling sensation on her arms made her feel as though she was being watched. Instinctively, she turned in the direction of the gaze and found herself locking eyes with a man in his 50s, his brown eyes fixed on her as he sipped his wine slowly with a calculative look. Mia froze, unable to tear her eyes from him, nor could she move. Her heart slowly began to race and her hands began to shake as she gazed into the man's eyes. Though she'd never met him before, she felt like she had. Blurry images began to flash into her head, and her head started to hurt like it would split in two. "You are not of my seed, little one. If you ever call me father, I will cut off your little tongue. Take that thing out of my sight. Cut her open and plant it there." The voices and activities in the hall began to fade into a distant murmur, drowned out by the overwhelming rush of unknown blurry visions flooding Mia's mind. Each word uttered by the unknown man in her memories echoed with haunting clarity, sending shivers down her spine. She didn't know why this utter stranger standing 10 feet away from her was triggering such memories from her mind, but she wanted it to stop. Her heart pounded erratically, and her hands trembled uncontrollably as she struggled to break free from the suffocating grip of those memories. Tears blurred her vision as she fought against the onslaught of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Snap out of it, Mia," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible amidst the chaos raging within her. With a shaky breath, she forced herself to blink away the tears and focus on the present like she'd always done whenever she had nightmares as a child. She placed her hand against her chest and began to whisper silent, reassuring words to herself. "Snap out of it, Mia. None of that is real. Stop hallucinating and face reality." Only then did she begin to stabilize and her breathing began to return to normal. But when she opened her eyes, the man who had triggered such a reaction from her had already turned away, seamlessly blending into the crowd of mingling guests. She looked around and sighted his side profile as he wished Frederick Wallace a happy birthday. As if sensing her gaze, he turned to look at her and winked his eyes with a devilish smirk on his face. Panic surged through her veins as she stumbled backward, her mind reeling with fear. Who was he and why was she reacting to him in such a way? Mia thought as she hurried to leave the hall and go far away from him. She'd explain to Rain later why she had to leave, but she wouldn't be able to handle another hour in the same hall as that man. In her haste to escape, Mia collided with someone, her drink splattering across their dress. Before she could even apologize, Elena, whose blue dress was dripping with orange juice, gasped dramatically, her voice cutting through the air like a sharp knife. "How dare you ruin my dress?" she exclaimed, her loud voice drawing the attention of the few people standing close to them, with Owen being among them as he was mingling with the other businessmen at the banquet. He'd noticed Mia's entrance and he'd seen how she was trying to avoid his direction, and he also hadn't bothered to seek her out as he knew before the end of this event, she'd be the one running to him for help. Mia's unstable mind began to calm down as she braced herself for the drama she knew Elena would make for her ruined dress. She knew all too well that Elena would seize any chance to humiliate her in front of others. And her mistake of emptying her glass on her was a big opportunity for Elena to take and make it a big deal. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you coming," Mia apologized, her voice barely above a whisper as she frantically searched for a way to diffuse the situation and leave the hall rather than create an unnecessary drama. But Elena's eyes flashed with malice as she raised her voice, making sure their exchange wouldn't go unnoticed by the surrounding guests. "Your apology means nothing when you did it on purpose just to embarrass me. First you took my dress from me at the mall, and now you ruin this dress. Did you think the dresses are made out of the rags you wore in the slum of Whispering Way?" Elena declared, her tone laced with a strong resentment that didn't go unnoticed by Mia. "Someone like you doesn't even belong here in the first place," Elena's best friend, Claire, said. "You are a disgrace to women and a good-for-nothing whore. You dislike Elena and even ruined her dress because she was given your position at the company. Did you think we all didn't know what you did?" You are a two-faced, ugly bitch. You played with Neil Weiner and Owen Sullivan's hearts like you played with water, and now you showed your face in public thinking we will forgive and forget what you've done. How stupid of you." With those words, the guests who'd been ignoring Mia the entire time began to whisper among themselves about her shamelessness. Some didn't even bother to lower their voices and spoke so that she could hear them loud and clear. "If she were my daughter, I'd have poisoned her myself rather than let someone as disgraceful as her mingle among the innocent. She shouldn't be allowed into such a respectful event," remarked an elderly woman to her friends, who also agreed. "It's a shame though, she's such a pretty lady, but she spoiled herself this way. Poor Neil Weiner, he hasn't come out for almost a week because of this waste of space. Now, she has the audacity to express hatred towards Elena Fanning. I have never felt such strong hatred towards anyone before, like the way I despise Mia Harrison. I cannot even bear to look at her." Mia felt a burning mix of shame and anger as she listened to their words. She tightly gripped her dress, trying to control her urge to wipe the smirk off Elena's face and silence the people forever so that no one would speak ill of her again. They hated her? She loathed them more than anything and desired to distance herself from these people. Never had she felt as helpless as she did now, nor had she ever harbored such animosity towards strangers. Rain, standing with her father and brother, noticed the crowd beginning to turn against her friend. She promptly instructed the event organizer to play the video she had prepared for her father on the screen to divert the people's attention away from Mia. The hall lights immediately dimmed into a mellow glow, and the screen came on, drawing everyone's focus away from Mia, as intended. However, the video that played was not the one Rain had arranged. Instead, it was something that elicited gasps of shock and disbelief from the audience. Mia's face drained of color as she stared at the screen in utter disbelief. Chapter 199 Humiliation. Mia's face drained of color as she stared at the screen in utter disbelief. How was this possible? She thought to herself as she watched what was going on the screen of the hall where she was stripped naked with an unknown man in a hotel room, making out intensely. Right before her face, the screen kept changing to different scenes of her with different men in hotels. She'd never felt this disgusted and dirty in her entire life. She'd heard of her trending videos online, but not once had she had the courage to watch any of them because of the fear of the hate she might find there, and not once had it occurred to her that whoever made those videos had somehow edited her face into them to make it believable. She knew the person in the video wasn't her, but if she were to be someone else watching this, nothing would stop her from believing that the person on the screen wasn't Mia Harrison. Mia stood frozen in place as she heard the disgust in Frederick Wallace's voice as he commanded someone to turn the screen off. Immediately the screen was turned off, the lights of the hall came back on, and every single head in that hall, including Frederick, turned in her direction. Mia had never wished to disappear from the face of the earth like she did now. If only the ground would open up and swallow her up, she'd have been so grateful rather than to face the hateful looks directed at her. She looked around to see if there was anyone who would believe her if she were to tell them that she wasn't the one on the screen, but then none of the guests seemed like they were ready to believe her. Some of the men were even giving her a signal to contact them after the event, while some were smirking at her as if wanting to make reservations with the talented whore they'd just watched on the screen. Before Mia could even speak or react, she felt something cold splashed on her. She flinched when she realized one of the guests had angrily poured her wine on her. "You little bitch, how dare you disgrace women in such a way? If you want to whore around with men, do you have to record it and shove it down our husbands' faces at an event? Oh my goodness, she's gone too far with this. Send her out of here and remove her from our circle," yelled random strangers from the guests. No wonder Neil is so heartbroken. She has hurt him in the worst way possible. Her mother must have been so disappointed in her. Before Mia knew it, strangers started pouring their drinks on her and hurling insults that struck her deeply. In an attempt to shield her pregnancy, she instinctively embraced her stomach when a glass unexpectedly hit her arm. She found herself unable to defend against the attacks, only able to watch in humiliation as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please, stop," she whispered softly as she retreated to evade the things being thrown at her. Rain, unable to bear it any longer, was about to rush to protect her friend when Max, who was standing next to her, restrained her. "Let go of me," she defiantly glared at his hand, disregarding the fact that he was the love of her life when it came to her best friend. However, Jason intervened and stated, "Don't release her, Max. Associating with a person like that woman will tarnish our reputation. Jason is correct, their father agreed. Stay out of it, Rain. It's not your concern. But, Dad, don't say another word, Rain. I don't want to see you with that woman ever again. Her father, who had never raised his voice at her before, left Rain stunned when she saw his disapproving expression. Unable to break free from Max's hold, she was compelled to witness the distressing situation as her friends suffered at the hands of the guests who aimed to teach her a lesson. Oh, Mia, Rain thought as tears welled up in her eyes. I'm terribly sorry I couldn't prevent this. I shouldn't have invited you. Mia hugged her stomach tightly as another item hit her chest. She turned on her heels, about to flee the hall, when she slipped on the wine on the floor. She fell on her behind, but the pain of her fall was nothing compared to the pain in her heart at the thought that Neil had obviously believed that fake video and isolated himself, refusing to meet her. He'd not even bothered to confront her about it and believed it straight on. If he truly loved her like he'd claimed, he wouldn't have subjected her to such humiliation by not coming out. Tears continued to flow down her cheeks as she felt another glass of wine being poured over her head, the liquid trickling down to her hair and face. She clenched her bottom lip tightly to suppress her sobs, choosing to remain seated without making an effort to stand up. Suddenly, she sensed someone approaching and bending down in front of her. When she looked up, she saw that it was Owen, wearing a faint smile on his face. "Oh, my dear," he murmured softly, meant only for her ears, "you claimed Wayner loved you, but see how he believes those videos. I've always told you, no one on this planet could love you as much as I do. I am willing to overlook everything and clear your name if you agree to come back to me," he entreated, extending his hand for her to take. "Take my hand now, and I will put an end to this. Take my hand, and I will ensure that every person who has tormented you today faces consequences. I will shield and cherish you." This was the moment he had been waiting for, her moment of vulnerability where she had no one to turn to but him. From the despair in her eyes, it was clear she was shattered and searching for someone to believe her, and who else could that be but him? He was completely convinced that she would accept his assistance now that she had fallen from her high horse. However, to his astonishment, she averted her gaze from his outstretched hand and turned away from him without a word. Ignoring his offer, she tried to rise to her feet, provoking his anger at her rejection after his hard work. In a fit of rage, he deliberately stepped on her dress, causing her to fall back down. "How could you betray me, Mia?" he bellowed furiously for everyone to hear. "After all I've given you and forgiven your past indiscretions with other men, you still chose to hurt me like this." His words were intended for the guests to hear and think that he was one of her victims. "I was prepared to welcome you back, but now, I'm not sure if I can ever forgive you." Mia glanced at him in disbelief. Was he also trying to make her situation worse because she'd ignored him? She didn't know whether to cry more or laugh at his drama. Did he think because she was on the floor she'd run to him for help? She'd rather die than go back to a man like him. Mia thought stubbornly, and thus because of Owen's words, more drinks continued to descend on her. "You'll rot in hell, Mia Harrison," yelled someone as they spat on her. "Mr. Sullivan is even willing to forgive your sins, yet you insult his kindness. Tisk, you must be a foolish woman to think you can play with wealthy men to get your way up." Elena watched in amusement as Mia was put in her rightful place. She couldn't have been happier by the outcome. And because she hadn't done enough of her own damage, she walked over to Mia with her friends and roughly tugged at her hair. Without giving Mia a chance to react, Elena landed a resounding slap on her face, causing her head to jerk to the side before spitting on her. "That is for daring to ruin my dress." Mia was in disbelief at being slapped by Elena. She remained motionless with her head turned to the side. As she looked up again, her eyes lacked their usual life. She stopped crying and stared at the people around her with soulless eyes. They had not only shattered her heart but also her spirit. She curled up, hugging her knees to her chest, and rested her head between them. She refused to cry. From a corner of the hall, Kelvin Rodrigo observed his daughter's suffering. He relaxed in his chair, finding satisfaction in witnessing how far people were willing to go to break her. Mia had been at the center of his past conflicts with his beloved wife, Ella, who had gone to great lengths to shield the girl from him, even seeking help from her ex-lover. Kelvin had always wanted Mia to pay for being a cause of his separation from Ella. Seeing her endure such torment now provided him more gratification than he had ever imagined. He'd have to admit though, Owen Sullivan was indeed much like him. He knows how to break a woman and make her submit, but then Mia was just like her mother, stubborn and strong-headed. She'd never submit to anyone no matter how much she suffers. Chapter 200 His mistake of not contacting her. A few hours ago, before the Wallace birthday party, in the dimly lit study of one of Neil's sprawling estates in a city far away from Mirage Mesa, the clock ticked relentlessly, marking the passing of yet another sleepless night for him. Hunched over his desk amidst piles of papers, he rubbed his tired eyes, feverishly preparing for the impending meeting with his investors the next day. The day he was released from prison, he'd fallen sick for the first time in his adult life. Shivering throughout his journey from Novaria to his destination, he was aided by Annalise Martinez and Liam. Annalise had gone out of her way to arrange his attorneys at Kai's request, expediting his release. Despite leading people to believe he was in Mirage Mesa, he actually went to another city where a team of doctors awaited his arrival upon learning of his illness. He remained unconscious for 2 days before recovering from his intense fever. Upon waking, he contemplated calling Mia immediately. However, realizing he no longer possessed his wealth as Neil Weiner, he refrained from contacting her, unwilling to return to her empty-handed. Despite yearning to be with her, he couldn't bear the thought of appearing before her as a diminished version of himself, lacking the resources to protect her. He'd missed her terribly and wanted nothing but to go to her at that moment, but then he didn't want to go to her as a number 2, with no wealth and power, but the publicity of his injustice. He wanted to go to her when he'd taken back his position as top 1 from Owen Sullivan. He wanted to return to her when he'd established the Galvera enterprise back to its original position. Because of his absence, his company had gone down terribly, all thanks to the Rodrigo enterprise and the OSG company. He didn't want to give them a reason to bully his woman when he had no power to do anything. If he wanted to show himself to the world again, he wanted to do it as Xavier Galvera. He told his bodyguards to keep a close eye on Mia and protect her in his absence. He'd have called her if he could trust himself not to run to her the moment he'd heard her voice. He wanted to focus on his work without distraction, and then he'd go to her and explain his reasons. Neil sighed and glanced at the framed photograph of her that was on his desk. Just by looking at her smiling face in the photograph, a faint smile graced his lips. Looking at her not only made him happy but also gave him the strength to keep working. His desk was filled with stacks of papers and folders that he needed to go through today. He had a very important meeting tomorrow with some investors that would help his company in a huge way. After tomorrow, he would fly back to his woman, Neil decided, and resumed work despite his exhaustion. His once immaculate appearance now bore the unmistakable signs of exhaustion, dark circles etched beneath his eyes, and his usually sharp demeanor dulled by fatigue. Yet, he continued to work without leaving his study room for any lunch breaks as he planned to finish everything today, then have the meeting tomorrow morning, and then go back home. Home, he thought with a smile, was something he never had in the past 20 years, but now he planned to build that with Mia and their child. The glow of the television in his study room cast a soft, flickering light across the room, the volume muted as he didn't want to be disturbed by it. However, if he'd looked up or turned up the volume, he'd have noticed 30 minutes ago that the channel was talking about Mia's scandal, which he was completely unaware of and hadn't been informed by anyone. With a weary hand, he reached for his coffee, his thoughts consumed by the relentless stream of tasks demanding his attention. But then, as if drawn by an unseen force, his gaze drifted to the screen, and he froze when Mia's photos with several men were on display. Automatically, he reached for the remote and turned up the volume. She hasn't denied nor confirmed any of the scandals, and we all have enough evidence to believe that she was the one in the videos. Miss Harrison has proven herself unworthy of Neil Weiner and Owen Sullivan's trust. People are now demanding her downfall. Everything the reporter was saying next blurred away in Neil's head as he reached for his phone and searched on the net for the videos they were speaking of. When he found one of them after a long process of agreeing he was an adult, he couldn't believe his eyes. His fingers tightened around his phone, his knuckles turning white. The veins on his forehead throbbed in rage. He was so mad he wanted to find the bastard who dared frame Mia for such an act. Everyone might believe this shit he was watching, but not him. He'd memorized Mia's body and knew every little detail of her body when they were in the cabin. He'd bathed with her and laid in bed with her naked. From that, he knew 100%, without a doubt, that this woman making out with men wasn't his woman. The thought that someone had done this to ruin her made him so angry. He'd only woken up a day before yesterday and he'd not watched the news nor had he bothered to check the internet because of how everyone was trying to reach him. If he'd checked it, he'd have known sooner that Mia was subjected to such humiliation. And now, Mia. As the gravity of the situation sank in, Neil's heart clenched with regrets of not reaching out to her when it was obvious she was subjected to such injustice. The weight of his stupid idea of not contacting her until he'd made everything right suffocated him with a sense of helplessness and guilt. In that moment, the papers on his desk and the looming meeting with his investors faded into insignificance, as he kicked his chair away and stood up. If everything he'd read online was true, then Mia would probably be thinking he believed the rumors and had not reached out to her because of it. She'd hate him for this. Those thoughts fueled his determination to get to her before it was too late. He called Liam and James, who were working in the study room next to his, but when none of them heard his thundering call, he kicked the door open, startling the two men busy before their computers. "Whoa, man, what was that for?" Liam asked, standing up from behind his desk as Neil strode in carrying his suitcase. "I have to leave immediately," he said to Liam before turning to James to order, "Call Zephyr. I need to know where Mia is at this moment." James didn't question anything and called the head of the bodyguards assigned to Mia, but the phone rang and the man didn't pick up. He tried to call the others, but still the same, they didn't pick up. He then looked at Neil with a frown. None of them are picking up. "Damn it. I will make sure I fire them all for their incompetence," he thundered angrily. Leaning back against the sofa, Liam stretched his legs out and studied the dark blue suit Neil was wearing with a frown. "Of course you would. By the way, what about the social gathering you invited the new investors to this evening? You can't miss it when some of them are already arriving. It just isn't done that way." "I forgot about the damned gathering," he said, glowering out the window at his own guests who were just arriving. He'd decided to have the gathering to make more connections rather than continue avoiding every social gathering like he used to do in the past. However, at this point where his woman needed him more than ever, he didn't care less about the gathering. "Stand in for me, will you? Tell them something urgent came up and I have to attend to it personally. Can I borrow your pilot?" he added, absently putting his suitcase down and tying his tie. "My plane is not available at the moment." "Just my pilot?" Liam said, glancing up at James, who'd perched on the arm of the sofa and was trying to get information on Mia's whereabouts at the moment. "Not my plane?" Neil turned aside as his housekeeper rushed in to give him 2 briefcases she'd packed at his instructions. "I need your plane and your pilot," he said impatiently upon realizing he'd need both. "That depends on where you want him to take you." Satisfied that he had everything he needed for his journey, Neil finally turned his full attention on his friend who looked for every opportunity to annoy the hell out of him. "Where the hell do you think I'm going?" "How should I know? If it's Mirage Mesa, Zen, don't you think you should call Mia first?" "No, I don't know how she'll react when I've not contacted her in almost a week. I don't want her taking off somewhere to avoid me. If I fly commercial, it will take me hours longer to get to her." He said, "Liam, I've messed up big time for not reaching out to her sooner." "Well, is it the right time for me to tell you that I told you so? You've let her wait for a week after your release. I told you relationships aren't done that way. You have to make sure she's your first priority in everything. I told you to call her and tell her about your plans, but you—" "I don't have time for this bullshit, Liam." Neil cut him off. Then he stopped as his driver spoke from the doorway behind him. "I've got the car out in front, ready to go, sir. And I talked to Jerry on the car phone. He says the plane's fueled and ready to fly. When are you going to be ready to leave?" "I think," Liam joked dryly, "he's ready now." Giving Liam a disgusted look, Neil pulled his suitcase and turned to James. "Have you found it?" "Wait a minute," James said. Then a few seconds later he exclaimed in excitement, "Yes. She'd just arrived at the Wallace birthday party. It's posted all over the net. She should be there right now." "Thank you," Neil said with quiet sincerity. "You're welcome," James replied, beaming at him. "Please give my regards to Mia." "Send her my heartfelt affection," Liam replied, getting up and becoming serious as he extended his hand to shake Neil's. "Best of luck." They watched him stride swiftly out the door. Then James looked at Liam and said, "That man loves her so much that he doesn't care that many people will think he's a fool for wanting her after the scandals and rumors. All that matters to him is that she loves him. I just hope she still feels the same way about him. Women can be difficult to understand, and if he hasn't reached out to her in a week while she's going through a tough time, she might be furious when they reunite." James gave him a stern look. "You speak as though you are an expert on women despite never having been in a committed relationship." Liam grinned boyishly. I may not be committed, but I understand women because I enjoy their company. One doesn't need to be in a serious relationship to comprehend their thoughts and emotions.